Hello, everyone. Today we're back on YouTube and we're going to talk about vibe coding and SEO. We're going to talk about Lovable, we're going to talk about Claude Code, and we're going to discuss the risks these new tools pose for SEO. Indeed, we've seen a lot of things with the team regarding vibe coding and SEO, so I'm going to tell you a bit about it today. I'm going to share my screen with you to show you some articles that have come out and that got me started in this area, along with a few client calls, roughly speaking. Typically, the first articles were about why is it that sites posted on Webull struggle to get indexed, both for the search engine, for Google, for ELM, and for ChatGPT. So here, this is an article that was published on February 1st. I was in a WhatsApp group with some extremely advanced SEOs in the English-speaking world, and they were saying the same thing. There too, there was an article on Twitter, on LinkedIn that came out on January 1st saying, why is it that sites on Webull struggle to get indexed? On top of that, on my end, I saw two major Claude Code projects. They were also having a really hard time getting indexed. So I wanted to talk about it a bit to give you my opinion on the matter and share some ways to avoid having this problem in the future. Let me introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Leopold Vince. I run an SEO agency with about 10 people. We help all types of projects with content production and backlink acquisition. And we make sure that technically the sites are solid and get indexed properly. So typically, that's the mindset behind why I'm creating this content. Today, roughly speaking, there's a recurring problem. Lovable sites and Claude Code sites are struggling with indexing. Both of them are more or less affected. I'm going to present to you two slightly different cases, two slightly different problems. For me, the Lovable case is a bit different from the Claude Code case. And in both cases, these are somewhat different issues and audiences. So I'm going to talk to you about them a bit. I'll put the article I wrote on this topic in the description. If you want to check it out, please feel free. Yeah, the goal is for it to be useful to me. A bit of support, a memo in terms of the text. The first point is about Lovable. It's really the JavaScript problem. Typically, Lovable makes websites that are indeed beautiful, but they're also powered by JavaScript. There's a huge amount of JavaScript in the projects. Lovable generally, and a lot of JavaScript that's rendered on the client side. So that's what we call CSR, client-side rendering. And so basically, it's JavaScript frameworks like React, Next, etc., that result in a lot of the work being done in the browser. So if you're using Google Chrome, it's Google Chrome that will render the site, that will process the site. And so basically, Google Chrome will do the work of displaying those nice visuals for you, of making something that looks good. But unfortunately, this nice work means that Google itself doesn't want to put in that effort. Google, while it can render JavaScript, it requires additional effort. There are two things to keep in mind when that's the case. The first thing is that if Google needs to put in a lot of effort, it will take more time before it actually does so, compared to something that loads in plain HTML in the usual way. And that arrives directly as a nice page. Obviously, Google will take longer to get there, to display it. This content, to view this content and execute the JavaScript, to render the JavaScript, as we say, then to read all of the content that was generated in JavaScript. That's why at this point in time, for all our clients, we recommend avoiding links that are generated or produced by JavaScript and that are not present in the DOM, in the base HTML, but also more generally to avoid all issues related to content generated by JavaScript. Also, it will be poorly rendered by Google or will take time to be processed both by internal tools and by Google. So basically, JavaScript isn't really the enemy of SEO. It was for a while, but it's much less of an issue now than it used to be. However, at this point, it still remains a challenge that is still somewhat complicated for Google to process. So basically, sites built heavily with JavaScript generally tend to generate quite a few problems, especially delays in indexing. By the way, Lovable's response to this was simply, thank you. There you go, pages can be discovered within a few hours. And if everything has been done properly, you can have something indexed quickly, which isn't entirely untrue. A site that has a lot of external signals, a lot of backlinks, for example, or a lot of incoming traffic, it will tend to get indexed faster than a site that was just created, one that's just sitting in a corner and isn't indexed quickly. But roughly speaking, there's still an issue with JavaScript where Lovable has an opinion that isn't very clear, which is that by default, they send a lot of JavaScript, a lot of content in JavaScript, and we have quite a few problems because of that. So clearly, as we can see, indexing on Lovable is really problematic, and the indexing rates are much lower than average. The second one is Claude Code. Claude Code, as of now, is really the hot topic. Everyone is having fun with Claude Code. It's the tool of the moment. So what's happening with Claude Code? On Claude Code, I've seen two projects. They were more related to programmatic content that was presented to me, and they couldn't get indexed. So one project was in English, and the other was in English and Thai, something like that. Both projects, in my opinion, had the same problem with hundreds or even thousands of pages. day one. So when you start and launch a new project, especially a project that's SEO first, which is often the case with programmatic sites where SEO is the main acquisition channel, you really often regularly run into problems that are going to come up. In this case, in my opinion, we're actually triggering some spam signals with Claude Code. In cases where you launch a site with thousands of pages, naturally, Google thinks, if someone is trying to manipulate Google, what better way than to show up with thousands of pages after all? So even if the content quality is good, even if there are some backlinks, Google struggles to index and simply doesn't want to index. In my opinion, there are even penalties for those initial spam signals, which are given to Claude Code sites like that. So I've seen 2 sites with hundreds, even thousands of pages that had little prior existence suddenly appear day one with thousands of pages. And of course, both of the ones I saw had the same outcome, a failure rate that was unfortunately quite sad. A pretty funny anecdote, though, is that one of the 2 projects was getting a huge amount of traffic from Bing. We're talking about 15,000 visits per month from Bing, even though it wasn't indexed on Google. For both projects, I tried to handle them in pretty much the same way. I tried to force indexing in Search Console, but it didn't work. I tried to force indexing with an external indexer, like a fast indexer, but that didn't work either. Sometimes the URLs would get indexed for a day or 2, but then they would get de-indexed. So that's when I tell myself there must be a filter. On Google's side, it's about spam detection on Claude Code sites. It's related to several things, obviously the volume of pages, but also the type of code used, which can encourage spam. Quite simply, Claude Code projects are, roughly speaking, easy to launch. Google says to itself, okay, let's be careful. These are architectures that we don't know yet, so we take precautions with indexing on that front. One thing to note is that there are traditional CMSs that provide trust signals. Typically, WordPress is known and recognized by Google, and overall, according to my friends, WordPress projects tend to get indexed better, even for things that come out of nowhere, than other projects. Claude Code is a bit more like classic HTML, so maybe sometimes you'll need to prioritize WordPress, even if it means connecting Claude Code to a WordPress site, but prioritize using WordPress. Shopify tends to get indexed very well with Shopify IPs that are somewhat whitelisted and so on. So Shopify is really, really good. Webflow also tends to perform very well because of Webflow IPs and because the people who use Webflow are paying customers. So quite simply, there's already a basic filter with CMSs like Shopify and Webflow because you're paying for them. So quite simply, CMSs of this kind tend to get indexed better, to be better referenced more easily than pure HTML, vibe, coding, etc. At this point, what we do is really, as I often say, put humans at the center. So basically, we generate the content with AI. Yes, that's true, but we do it one by one. We do it manually. We target each SERP individually. We analyze them. We study them. We run them through semantic tools again. We check all of that. We proofread all of it. So there you have it. As for AI, I think it's a huge tool that will allow us to do a lot of things. Google as well. They've been telling us this for a long time. But I think human oversight is necessary. Google has always said this. And basically, they want people to publish at a natural pace and for it to remain natural. So basically, by natural, we mean at a speed that a human could manage. And you might say to me, yes, but if I had a team of 50 writers, I would publish a huge number of pages every day. That's true, and you're absolutely right. But if you had a team of 50 writers, you would have what we call a real marketing mix. Basically, what happens if you have a large team and significant resources is that you'll publish a lot of content. It's totally possible. This is true for media outlets right now, a lot of content, and yet they don't have any problems. Why is that? What's the difference between their content, their site, their approach to Google, and ours, the approach of smaller publishers, smaller companies who might go and publish a lot of content all at once? The difference is that they have a more significant marketing mix. They have recurring traffic, brand recognition. People search for their brand. They click on it. They spot it. They have active social networks that bring them traffic to every article they publish. They have YouTube. They have video. They have recognition. In short, they have traffic coming from sources other than SEO. So once again, publish a lot of content and go spam Google in big quotation marks, send it a lot of content and a lot of material. These are things that are possible as soon as you have a diversified marketing mix that isn't solely based on SEO. If your marketing mix is based solely on SEO, that is to say, you don't have social networks, or at least none that generate traffic. The important thing in all this is the reality. Does it generate traffic? Not just do you have it, but do you have recurring traffic coming in from outside Google or even via Google for that matter? If it's very recurring, that's okay. Do you have significant brand awareness? Do you have other ways to generate traffic even from the other side? For example, large-scale cold emailing generates traffic, and that's something Google likes. So if you have all that, honestly, that's great. And normally you shouldn't have any problems. To send multiple pages and use vibe coding tools or things like that, indexing will still happen because there are other signals that will allow indexing to go through and will outweigh the signals that Google detects as spam signals. So all of this is really something important and noteworthy. So if you've run into these kinds of problems, if you haven't kept the human element at the center, if your production speed was unnatural, what I recommend is to work on your marketing mix. Because with a good marketing mix, outside of SEO, your SEO will benefit. And overall, to all my clients, I advise them to work on their marketing mix outside of SEO because it's something that will help them in the long run and will also help their SEO. So clearly, it's something we work on. So our concrete recommendations, if you ever have to vibe code a site, do Claude Codes or Lovable, will be to try to go further with a well-known CMS and if possible, a paid CMS like Shopify or Webflow. Webflow now has MCP Cloud. So there you go. These are all things we can work on. Work with things that certify you are someone serious and not just a little hacker working on your own. Keep a natural publishing rhythm. At the beginning, the best is 1 page per day at most. Then when you see that everything is being indexed properly and there are no issues, you can move up to 2 pages per day, then 3 pages per day, and so on, and keep an acceleration that feels natural. Once again, you want someone to look at your growth curve and wonder, just by looking at the quantitative curve, more than the question of quality, whether this is a spammer or not. Obviously, quality will also matter, but it's the quantitative curve that we use to detect spam signals, especially now that content has generally become very high quality thanks to AI, making it quite difficult to distinguish good from bad content based solely on analysis. My advice, and at least that's what we do here, is to have content reviewed and rewritten, not necessarily rewritten, but at least reviewed, adapted, and modified by a human who has some expertise or knowledge, someone who understands the SERP, who knows what's happening on Google, and of course checks the technical fundamentals. That's the foundation, especially for lovable content. If our site isn't rendered without JavaScript, well, that's a problem. Well, it's going to be much more complicated, much longer. Make sure you have a sitemap, make sure your robots.txt is properly managed. In short, all of this, diversifying your traffic sources, as we've mentioned, an important marketing mix. And if you ever have any doubts about anything, don't hesitate to call us. We'll always be here to do a quick audit for you. It only takes me 2 seconds to take a look. If there's a real problem with your site, so don't hesitate. Let me know, ping me about it, and I'll be happy to take a quick look for you. Thank you all. It was a pleasure to present this to you. This was Leo, and today we were here to talk about vibe coding, cloud code, and SEO.